Is there something that you've been wanting to move on, something that you've been meaning to act upon, but you haven't acted for some reason? Maybe perhaps you felt as if you didn't have it all figured out. Maybe perhaps you felt as if you didn't know what all the steps were. Maybe perhaps you figured that the competition was going to be too fierce. Or maybe perhaps you thought that maybe you didn't have the skills, the talents, and the things that were necessary. And so this thing that you know that you needed to act on, writing this book, this thing that you've been wanting to act on, starting that business, this thing that you've been wanting to move on, to go back to school and get another degree, this thing that you've been wanting to move on, to get out of debt and do the things that are required, or to pursue your goals and your dreams, you just haven't moved. That's right. You've told yourself that I don't have all the answers. I don't know how I'm going to come up with the money. I don't know if I'm going to get the support. I don't know if this is going to work out. I don't know where the resources are going to be coming in from. I don't know if I'll be able to get the right people on my team. And so you've been wanting to move. You've been wanting to act, but yet and still you haven't, because you keep saying to yourself that I don't have it all figured out. And so here's what I want to say to you. And I want you to write this down. If you're a note taker, write this down. I'm going to make sure I say this more than once. If you move on what you know, things will become clear. But if you don't move on what you know, what you don't know will paralyze you. I'm going to say that one more time. If you move on what you know, then things will become clear to you. If you move on what you know, this desire to write the book, if you move on what you know, this desire to pursue your goals and your dreams, if you move on what you know, that this job that you've been showing up to, you know it's not in fulfillment of your calling, that there's something more in you. If you move on what you know, the fact that you know that you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, if you move on what you know, knowing that you got to get out of this debt, if you move on what you know, that you know that you've got to salvage and save your marriage, if you move on what you know, things will become clear. But if you don't move on what you know, the little bit that you don't know will paralyze you. It'll keep you from moving forward. It'll keep you from taking action. It'll keep you from doing that thing that you know that you need to do. That thing that you know that can launch your career, that thing that you know that's going to allow you to take your life to the next level, that thing that you know that's going to put you in position to have a much more fulfilling life, that thing that you know that's going to allow you to be a better mother, a better brother, a better sister, a better spouse, a better parent, that thing that you know that's going to allow you to have more energy because now you're in shape and you're doing the things that you need to do, that thing that you know, if you could just simply move on it, all of a sudden, things will become clear for you. All of a sudden, the right people will come into your space. All of a sudden, God will begin to reveal more things to you. But all of a sudden, if you choose not to move on what it is that you do know, every little bit of what you don't know will paralyze you. It'll have you not acting. And so a friend of mine, knowing that I love hearing about great stories. One of my friends gave me a call and she said, Andy, I gotta talk to you. This guy came to the real estate investor meeting and he shared this story, and right away I thought about you and so I just got to tell you this. She said, well, Andy, listen, I was at this real estate investor meeting and she said this guy came into the room and it was his opportunity to go ahead and talk and introduce himself to everybody, and he wanted to share this story with us. And so he said that he basically went through this personal journey of eventually becoming a real estate agent, and he went from being an agent to opening his own real estate office, and he became a real estate broker. And so he said that, he wanted to motivate and inspire all the real estate agents that were working with him. And so he said, periodically they would have office meetings. And he said, well, this time I'm going to get them fired up. And so he started a little buzz around the meeting to say, hey, listen, we're going to have a really, really special sales meeting. As a matter of fact, it's not just any kind of sales meeting, but listen to this. Somebody's going to end up leaving that meeting, probably making an additional $2,000. And so everybody everybody in the office, everybody starts talking about this upcoming meeting, and people are getting excited, and everybody's like, man, what is this meeting about? Is he launching something new? Is there something that we don't know about? Is there going to be a new training program? Is there a new system we're rolling out? Are we going to be doing some new marketing? And so there's a buzz around the office. And so finally, he decides to have this meeting. But of course, before he goes to the meeting, he swings by the bank and he goes out and he withdraws $2,000 cash. He says, I'm walking in there with $2,000 cash with me physically. And then on top of that, because all the buzz that was circulating in the office, that when he got in there for the meeting, I mean, it was packed. There were real estate agents who hadn't been in the office for he doesn't know how long, that all of a sudden he saw their faces. I mean, the room was completely packed. And so he walks up to the front of the room and then he says, listen, here's what we're going to do. I appreciate all of you showing up. And so, you know, I just thought we'd be creative. I thought we'd do something pretty cool. And so he says, here's what I decided to do. And so he reaches down in his pocket and he pulls out this big wad of $2,000. And so he got a bunch of $100 bills. And he says, you see these $2,000? And to really enroll the people emotionally, he throws the $2,000 up in the air and he just lets it fall so they could see all the money. He said, this $2,000 is going to go to one of you. And so basically, here's what we're going to do. I have a lead here. I have a lead, somebody that I know that could very possibly very much be interested in listing their property for sale. And so, as you know, that one of the things that I do in order to ensure that all of you have success, as we get calls here at the real estate office and as I pay money to get leads and the marketing that we do, when those leads come into the office, I put the leads out. But here's what I want to do. I want to identify who are the people who are really hungry, who are the ones that really want to make some things happen. And I want to make sure we start off the year fired up and do some special things. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give everybody this lead. Everybody in this room is going to have the same opportunity. And whoever comes back with the listing is going to get this $2,000 cash. And so he says, this $2,000, it's not going back in a bank account. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be here with me. And the moment you come back to this office with this listing, you get the $2,000. And so he said he was done and he was looking at the people and he's like, for sure, they've got to be fired up. And so now he's done giving his whole little presentation. And so right after that, he says the people just start leaving. All the real estate agents just start clearing it. They're all rushing and leaving out of the real estate office. And so he's like, man, and in his mind, he's wondering, well, who's going to be the one to come back with this listing? And so the following day, he's waiting and he still hasn't gotten a phone call. And so he goes into the office and when he walks into the office, he's looking around. I mean, it is like a ghost town. There's like no real estate agents in there, which isn't uncommon when they're out there hustling and getting things done. And then next thing you know, it's like another day goes by and he still doesn't really hear from anybody that's come back with the listing. And so he drives home and when he gets in the house, he's got this, you know, just this look on his face. And so his wife's like, what's going on? What's the matter? And he said, I decided to do something creative at the office. You know, I went and I withdrew $2,000. I called an office meeting. I got everybody in there. I got them fired up. I told everybody about this one listing. I said, whoever comes back with the listing, I'm going to give them the $2,000. And I just haven't heard from anybody yet. And she goes, oh my gosh. She said, well, honey, think about what you just did. She said, you just literally told over 200 real estate agents about one listing. She's like, I feel sorry for the poor lead that you gave them. I mean, this guy must have realtors banging on his door at all hours of the night. He must literally be having people blowing his phone up, making phone calls to him all day long. He's probably receiving brochures. There are people probably trying to hunt him down. I mean, really, that probably was not the smartest thing to do. Giving them a couple of leads, but giving everybody one lead, that's just a little out of control. She said, I can only imagine what this poor guy is going through. You really should check on this guy and make sure that everything's okay because I don't know. I don't think that was just in best judgment. And he started thinking about what his wife said. And he's like, oh, man, you know, it seemed like a good idea. But then he started putting himself in that position. He's thinking, oh, my gosh, I can only imagine the people banging on his door and the amount of people that are calling this guy and mailing him letters and, trying to get the listing. Maybe that wasn't the best idea. And so he gets back to the office and he says, I'm going to call this guy. And I'm going to let him know that I'm responsible for all the harassment he's been receiving and that, I apologize. It just wasn't the best way for me to handle, motivating and inspiring my staff. And so he goes in the office, goes into his drawer, looks through, finds the lead, then, tracks down, finds the telephone number, puts in a phone call, calls the guy, and the guy picks up the phone. And he goes, hey, how you doing? This is, John from such and such a real estate brokerage firm. He says, I'm actually the broker. And listen, I just really, man, I just want to say I'm sorry. I really want to apologize. And before you're wondering what I'm apologizing for, just want to let you know I'm the one that's responsible for all of these real estate agents that have been calling you nonstop. I'm the one that's responsible for all these real estate agents that have been banging on your door. I'm the one that's responsible for all these people who've been mailing out these letters to your house or doing whatever they're trying to do to get in contact with you. So I just really want to say that I'm sorry. And so the guy goes, I don't understand. What are you talking about? And then so he looks down at the lead and he's looking at the number. And so he's like, I am talking to so-and-so. He said, yeah. And he says, you are the property owner at such and such house. He said, yeah. And he says, well, I just wanted to apologize for all the people that have been banging on your door and giving you phone calls and harassing you. He says, well, I don't understand what you're talking about. He said, well, what do you mean you don't understand what I'm talking about? Have you been out of town? He says, no, I've been at my house every day. Well, let me ask you a question. I don't understand, sir. Have you not been getting knocks on your door? Have you not been receiving phone calls? Have you not been getting harassed? He says, no, I don't understand what you're talking about. No one has knocked on my door. Nobody has sent me any flyers or mailers. Nobody has picked up the phone to give me a call. He says, you've got to be kidding me. He said, no, I'm not kidding at all. And so he stays on the phone with the guy and this happened to be a guy who was in fact interested in actually listing his property. And I believe he stayed on the phone with the guy and got the listing. And so now he is just absolutely beside himself. He just doesn't understand. And so he's going back, he's checking the lead, and he's certain that this is what he handed out. He goes back and looks at the photocopies of what he handed out in the actual real estate meeting, and he knows that this is what he's handed out. And so, of course, he tells his wife, I don't understand, this is bizarre. And so he sends out an email and he tells everybody, listen, we're going to have a follow-up meeting because I need everybody to come in. And so he calls the meeting on. All these real estate agents, not all of them, but majority of them show up again. And so he's standing at the front of the room and he says, listen, the other day I brought you all in here and I wanted to do something special. I wanted to get you all fired up. And so I went over to the bank and I pulled out $2,000. And then I went through all of the leads that I had and I pulled out one of the best leads that we had available to us. I brought you all in the room. I gave all of you the exact same opportunity. I gave all of you the lead. I gave all of you the opportunity to make this additional $2,000. And I am absolutely beside myself because here's what happened. I didn't hear from you all after one day. I didn't hear from you all after 2 days. And finally I said, well, wait a second here. Maybe I gave him a bad lead. Maybe I'm missing out on something. And so I went in the drawer, I picked it out and I made the phone call. And guess who I got on the line? I got the property owner on the line who was in fact interested in actually selling his property and listing his property. And when I asked him, I said, sorry, sir, I'm sorry you've been harassed by all of my agents. I'm sorry about the fact that maybe perhaps they've been knocking on your door and making the phone call. And guess what he told me? He said he didn't get one phone call. He said not one person knocked on the door. And so I'm confused. I'm really, really confused right now. Help me to understand why none of you picked up the phone. Help me to understand why none of you knocked on the door. And one by one, as he went around the room, one by one, as he spoke to the people, as he spoke to his agents, every single one of them basically came up with the same excuse. And the excuse was that they just assumed. They assumed. And it was something that they didn't know. They didn't bother validating it by picking up the phone. They didn't bother validating it by actually getting in their car, driving over and knocking on the door. They assumed that, you know what? You had over 200 agents in the room when you made this announcement. You had over 200 agents fired up for this $2,000. You had over 200 agents that all knew about the same lead. And so the reason why we didn't move is because we just assumed that somebody else would have made it there before us. We just assumed that somehow, some way we weren't going to get the listing. And so here's what happened. They didn't move on what they knew. You see, because here's what they knew. What they knew was it was an extraordinary listing. What they knew is that there was an additional $2,000 bonus on the line. What they knew was that it was a possibility to make some additional income. But here's what they got caught up on. All the things that they didn't know, whether or not somebody else was going to get there before them. All the things that they didn't know, whether or not somebody else made the phone call. All the things that they didn't know, whether or not they would be the one to get the listing. And so here's what I say to you. If you move on what you know, things will become clear. But if you don't move on what you don't know will paralyze you. And some of you right now, as you're listening to my voice, there are some things that you know that there's this book in you. And so maybe perhaps you don't know what the title is. You don't know how you're going to get the book published. You don't know exactly where to start. But what I'm saying is if you move on what you know, things will become clear. But if you don't move on what you don't know will paralyze you. Some of you know that right now as you wake up every single day and you're showing up to that job in which you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, you know that something inside of you is saying that there's got to be more than this. That some of you know that as you go through your business on a daily basis, you know that you have the ability to take your business to the next level. You know that there's something in you that's saying that there's got to be more than this. Some of you know that regardless of the fact that you've gotten yourself in a financial situation and that you've accumulated debt, that you have the capacity to get out of this debt. Some of you know that you need to bring up your energy level, that you need to get in shape in order to make sure that you're making sure that you have the right health and do the things that are required of you. Some of you know that you're not in alignment with your goals and your dreams and that there's still something in you that needs to be pursued, but you haven't moved on what you know because of all the things that you don't know. And I want to remind you this, that if you could simply just move on what you know, then things will become clear. But if you don't move on what you know, what you don't know will paralyze you. And I know what it's like to have something in you and to be paralyzed. I know what it's like to wake up every day and go to a job or to be in a situation in which something inside of me knows that there's got to be more. And then getting caught up with all the things that I didn't know. Andy, I don't know if you leave this career that you got your accounting degree, you got your master's degree. I don't know. What if things don't work out? I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to be able to replace this income that I'm making here. I don't know if maybe perhaps that maybe I'm not cut out to be an entrepreneur. I don't know if things aren't going to necessarily work in my favor. And I remember staying there at that corporate position for a year and a half, paralyzed because of all the things that I didn't know. I didn't know if things were going to work out. I didn't know where the paycheck was going to come from. I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it. I didn't know if I was going to be able to deal with the rejection and possibly the humiliation of things not working out. I just didn't know. But finally, in December of 2004, I just decided to move on what I knew. And what I knew is that something was saying that there's got to be more than this. What I knew is that what I was doing at that moment was not in alignment with what God had intended for me. What I knew is that I wasn't fully utilizing my gifts and my talents. What I knew is that I wasn't fully happy and content with the way that I was living my life. And once I decided to move on what I knew and made a decision to walk into that office in December of 2004, all of a sudden things became clear to me. All of a sudden the right people came into my life. All of a sudden I began to develop my skills and my talents. All of a sudden new doors and opportunities began to work with me. Why? Because if you move on what you know, then things will become clear. But if you don't move on what you know, then what you don't know will paralyze you. And some of you right now, you know that there's some things that have been sitting on your heart. There's some things that you've been wanting to act on. There's some things that you know that you need to act upon, but you haven't moved because you're convinced yourself that you don't know the next step. You've convinced yourself that you don't have all the resources. You've convinced yourself that maybe perhaps things won't work out. You've convinced yourself that you just don't know everything. But what I'm saying to you is scratch that, erase that, purge it. If you move on what you know, then things will become clear. But if you don't move on what you know, the fact that you've got to write this book, if you don't move on what you know, the fact that you've got to take this business to the next level, if you don't move on what you know, the fact that you need to work and focus on this marriage and make it work, if you don't move on what you know, the fact that you need to get in alignment with the calling and the purpose on your life, if you don't move on what you know, the fact that you know that you need to create a budget and get out of debt, if you don't move on what you know, then what you don't know will paralyze you. And so I just want to give you a couple steps. Yeah, something that can maybe help you to get unstuck. Something that you can look back to and reference, and that you can apply this and get you to get past all the things that you don't know. And so if you're a note taker, I want you to write this down. The first thing that I want you to do is I need you to identify what you know. Identify what it is that you know. There are some things that you know in your heart that you need to go back and get that degree. You know that you need to make that career shift. You know that you need to start that business. You know that you need to apply more effort, more energy. You know that you can take this thing to the next level. You know that there's this gift, this talent, this thing that's sitting in you. You know that there's so much more to everything that you've thought about producing. You know this. And what I need you to do is focus on what you know. Do that first. Write that down. Identify what it is that you know. Now, once you've identified and you begin to focus on what it is that you know, I want you to use whatever it is that you know in order to act. Use the little bit that you know. I don't care how much it is, but use that in order to act. You're not going to have it all figured out. Understand that. That's why Theodore Roosevelt said that you got to do the best you can with what you have, with wherever you are right now. You're not going to have it all figured out. A.L. Williams said that all you can do is all you can do. And all you can do is enough, but make sure you do all that you can do. And with whatever it is that you have, whatever it is that you know is enough for you to do something, for you to take a step. Martin Luther King said that you don't have to see the entire staircase. All you've got to be willing to do is take the first step. And once you take the first step, things will become clear to you. You will see the next step. And once you take the second step, things will continue to become clear to you. And you will see the third step. And so if you move on what you know, things will become clear. But if you don't move on what you don't know will paralyze you. And so the first thing you've got to do is you've got to identify what it is that you know. And then you've got to make a decision and act on the little bit that you know, that you do know. because that's going to allow you to create some momentum. That's going to allow you to start the project. That's going to allow you to begin the process of taking yourself to the next level. That's what's going to allow you to go ahead and get that next degree. That's what's going to allow you to start that business. That's what's going to allow you to fire your boss. That's what's going to allow you to write a check and get rid of the debt. That's what's going to allow you to finally lose this weight once and once for all. That's what's going to allow you to be able to live in your purpose and do that thing that you are called to do. That's what's going to allow you to take the next step. And then once you've identified what it is that you know, and once you've made the decision to act on the thing that you know, what I want you to do next is to focus only on the things that you know, because that's what's going to allow you to keep pushing forward. What happens, Andy? Why do I need to do that? Because here's what normally happens. All of a sudden, we've identified the thing that we know. All of a sudden, now we've decided to take some step, take an action. But one of the things about life is, even though some things will become clear to you, there are going to still be some things that you don't know. And so what happens is, when you begin the process, you have to learn to focus on those things that you know. Because if you allow your focus to revert back to the things that you do not know, what you will find is, once again, you will become paralyzed. Once again, you will be suffering from this symptom called analysis paralysis. Once again, you will begin to sabotage yourself. Once again, you will begin to backpedal. And so what we want to do is say, listen, I understand there's some things I'm not going to know. I understand that unfortunately, I won't know everything. I understand that, especially when I have a big dream, a big goal, and I'm trying to take things to the next level. There's some things that I'm going to have to act on faith for. There's some things that I'm not going to clearly understand. There are some things that I'm going to have to wait for it to be revealed to me. But even though, instead of just focusing on all those things that I don't know, that I don't have control over, what I am going to do is I'm going to focus on what I do know, and I'm going to continue to sharpen my axe. I'm going to focus on the things that I do know, and I'm going to continue to make the phone calls. I'm going to focus on the things that I do know, and I'm going to continue to develop my gifts and my talents. I'm going to focus on the things that I do know, because that's the only way that things will become clear to me. Why? Because Andy told me, when you move on what you know, things will become clear. I understand that. But if I don't move on what I know, then what I don't know will paralyze me. Yeah. You got to move on what you know. This has been Andy Henriquez, reminding you to always show up for your life. Because if you don't, ladies and gentlemen, no one else will.